Hi, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast. My name is Isabel Ross, and I'm the coach at Peak Endurance Coaching. Episode 51 is an interview with Sam Suke, physiotherapist at Exercise Thought. Sam obtained his undergraduate physiotherapy degree at Monash University, while I adjust the screen, and wrote an honour thesis on the use of isometric exercises for treating tendon pain. In 2020, Sam will complete his postgraduate studies that place him in the top 8% of Australian physiotherapists. Sam's minor thesis in this postgraduate degree studies the effect that a physiotherapist's words have on a person's pain and performance. Sam teaches physiotherapy students through Monash University, Trobe University, Swinburne University of Technology, and the University of Melbourne. Sam is the Vice President of two councils for the Australian Physiotherapy Associations, the Victorian Branch Council and the Victorian Business Council. In the formative years of his career, Sam consulted through a large sports medicine clinic in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne and assisted the medical team at the Western Bulldogs, including the 2016 triple-premiership year. Sam has always delivered private consultations and group consultations, the latter being a combination of Pilates classes and over 60s classes. In recent years, Sam has supervised research at Monash University and consulted privately at local aged care facilities while maintaining a full clinical load. I was interested in interviewing Sam because I felt that words have a big effect, and words spoken and also words in our own head, obviously. So that's why I really wanted to talk with Sam and find out how the things we say, the things our peers say, and the things our treating practitioners say, how they all affect injury recovery, and also just general health and well-being. I believe they can affect that as well. I hope you find this conversation as interesting as I did. I know I certainly did, and I've ordered a couple of the books that he suggests towards the end. So I hope you maybe have a look at them and find them interesting too. Are injuries or niggles ruining your enjoyment of running and hindering your performance? Get on top of these and see the specialists at Health and High Performance. Utilising the latest in technology and with a wealth of experience, the team at Health and High Performance can assist you with all your running injury and performance needs. I go there regularly for just general checkups, and to keep my body in top-notch condition. And I think that's so important. We spend so much time training, we really should be looking after our body too. So to get back to enjoying your running and just generally achieving the results you know that you are capable of, head to www.healthhp.com.au/run. I really hope you enjoy my conversation with Sam, and please let me know what you think. Hi, Sam, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast.
Thanks, Isabel. Nice to be with you.
So can you tell my audience a little bit about yourself in your own words, your running background and how you got into physio?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Sam Sook. I'm a physiotherapist. I have been wanting to be a physiotherapist for a long time, and I started off assisting the physios at an AFL club and consulting through a large sports medicine practice in the eastern side of Melbourne. And I then fulfilled a 10-year goal of running my own practice, which is called Exercise Thought. We're going to talk about that later. I did my honours thesis under Professor Jill Cook and Dr. Ebony Rio on Achilles tendinopathy and how isometric exercise can influence Achilles tendon pain. And outside of physio, I'm a member of Inverloch Surf Lifesaving Club and patrolled with the rescue lifesaving helicopter for 6 summers. I'm looking forward to getting back to the beach when this winter season passes.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And can you explain? You said your practice is called Exercise Thought. Can you explain the reasoning behind the name of your physiotherapy practice?
Yeah. Thanks for taking interest. Exercise Thought is an encouragement for people to think, and we encourage people to think because 2 heads are better than 1. When a client adopts a research mindset in understanding their pain, understanding their injury, and understanding how they're going to recover and then perform after that, the results are so much better than if a client takes a passive approach to simply allowing the physio to do all the work and all the thinking. So we chose exercise thought as the name of the practice because we want people to engage actively with their care. There's good research to show that self-efficacy and belief and a couple of other factors associated with the person's engagement can predict better outcomes.
Yeah, that sounds fair enough. Now, one thing I noticed you talk about is having goals to help with recovery and with pain. And how does having goals help with the sensation of pain?
Yeah, great question. So it comes down to self-efficacy. A person, and it's not a term that we use much outside of the research, a person's self-efficacy is their ability or their belief in their own ability to achieve a particular outcome or a particular goal. And it's a strong predictor of outcomes in healthcare and in injury recovery. And so we believe that it's not always possible for us to completely shape someone's beliefs and someone's self-efficacy, and we shouldn't set out to do so. But if we could nudge their beliefs in the right direction, nudge their self-efficacy, and the way that we do that is from the outset, we talk about their goals and we talk about what steps need to be achieved in order to achieve those goals. And we have to recognize that there is a pain and there is a problem that has often prompted that first consultation. And we've got to acknowledge that and validate it. And we shouldn't be too quick to jump immediately from the pain to the goals, because sometimes people don't feel as though their problem has been thoroughly recognized and thoroughly understood. So once we've recognized the key problem and the dissatisfaction, we then have to move towards a goal. And we have some handouts that we give our clients that are personalized summaries of the goal that they're achieving and the strategies towards that goal from a physiotherapy perspective. And that handout will also include key prescriptions, key exercises, key thoughts, and key homework that helps them to get there. And the last measure that we use is we occasionally use a 0 to 10 pain scale, because a lot of our clients do come in speaking to us about a pain. We use that sparingly, because my understanding of the research says that 0 to 10 pain scale may not be the best means of assessing and progressing a person. We tend to use more of a 0 to 100 progress score, where 100 is complete recovery, complete performance, 100% satisfaction with the way that things are going with respect to their particular goal, and 0% being the starting point of when we first had an interaction between that client and the physiotherapist. So as an example, if you came in a couple of days or a week or maybe even a month after we'd first met, I'd ask you, Isabel, 100% is that perfect outcome? That's exactly where you want to be. That's what we've been working towards. 0 was where we started when we had our first conversation. Where would you put yourself on that journey today? And that would give me, as a physiotherapist, great insight into where you see your recovery. And it would also have each of us focus on and visualizing, whether it be conscious or a subtle subconscious focus on the desired outcome, on where we're heading.
And would you not focus on the pain because that tends to be sort of more a negative thing?
It's got to be horses for courses. We have to acknowledge the pain, especially if a person is very focused on it. And in the early parts of my career, I did make the mistake of not giving the pain enough attention, where a client would be very, and quite rightfully so, pain is a terrible experience and unpleasant, and must be acknowledged. And I think it was quite a sharp, painful lesson for me to learn that people didn't feel as though I was being compassionate because I wasn't acknowledging their pain. And it was far from the truth. I was very interested in seeing them get a good outcome for them, but I didn't give enough time acknowledging the problem before then moving towards the positive solution. So look, you're right. I agree with you. I think it's more positive and more proactive to focus on the goal.
Yeah.
But we've got to recognize that we shouldn't leap straight to that without first acknowledging the problem.
Yeah. And so can you give an example of a goal, like just say for an Achilles tendon?
Yeah, so Achilles tendon is great. So typically someone would, a classic story would be someone would say, I have this stiffness and this soreness in my Achilles tendon when I wake up the first few steps in the morning. It might hang around for several minutes after they've rose from bed, and they would often describe a change in the amount of running that they've been doing recently. So they might say, I haven't been running much at all, and then I've been running more recently. Or maybe they changed their footwear, which means that there's a change in the way that the Achilles tendon works. So that would be a typical story. And so the way that we'd set a goal is we'd focus not on getting rid of the Achilles tendon pain, because that's still focusing on the problem. We would focus on being springy in their legs, because the Achilles tendon functions as a spring, being able to run freely and run for the length or the duration that that person wishes, and to be able to do so without any concern at all. And in doing so, we focus on the joy or the freedom of being unrestricted in performance, as compared to the pain and the restriction that is currently facing this person. And particularly, I think with the language that we use as physiotherapists, metaphors can be very effective, and that's why talking about putting a spring back in your step, having that bounce back, that can be really helpful when talking about Achilles tendon recovery, because it is a spring. It does give us that bounce, and often springing and bouncing is something that people who are injured are apprehensive to do, because they're concerned that it's going to make the problem worse, or they're fearful that loading so dramatically could cause some problem, when in fact the Achilles tendon loves load. That's the only way and the best way of rehabilitating a tendon. You've got to put some load on it, and by load, it has to be the right kind of load, and often that's running. For people who are runners, the best kind of load is running. You've just got to find out what that best dosage is.
Fair enough. No, that sounds good. So you talk also about how the beliefs of our injury or our pain can affect the rate of healing or recovery. How does that work?
Oh, I don't know. This is a rabbit hole here. It's important to recognize that our beliefs are shaped through our whole lives. And a great illustration of that is, do you have children, Isabel? Yeah, I thought you did. If you've ever seen it, and most of us have, a child falls over, they graze their knees, maybe they've fallen off a bike, or they've tripped and landed on their shins. The reaction of the parent often influences the reaction of the child to that surprising event. If the parent says, "You're okay, honey, jump up, keep going," often the child does just that, and it looks a little bit stunned. Their face might just be a bit blank initially, but then they carry on. Whereas if the parent says, "Oh, darling, are you okay?" and runs over to the child often cries and looks more upset than in the first scenario. And so from this illustration, we can see that the influence of our upbringing, of our parenting, is significant in shaping our beliefs, and in particular, giving meaning to what is an unpleasant experience, such as surprise or falling over. And it's not clear whether or not that child in each scenario falling onto their shins had pain. We'd have to ask them. And often the meaning of pain, or the definition of pain, is shaped by the way that our parents have talked to us over the years, or the way that our teachers, our peers have talked about pain and injury. So it's not clear based on that information alone whether or not pain was felt. But you can see from this certainly how those around us have shaped our beliefs, and other stories as well. Like in our family, there's the bung left knee, and there's this joke about everyone across the generations has had a left knee pain. And so, what would you start thinking then if your parents and grandparents have talked about this bung left knee, and you start to notice a niggle in your knee? Do you think it's inevitable that I'm going to have this and I can't get rid of it? As opposed to a child of the same age with the same niggle in their knee having never been told anything about a bung left knee. And it's really, it can be very helpful, and it can be very much a hindrance, depending on what that behavior and what that belief is. So I don't think I could rightly tell you that I know how it works, but I do think that the old saying of we are the sum of the people we spend, the 5 people we spend the most time with. I think I've probably butchered that one, but
I think that's basically right. Yeah.
It takes a village to raise every human, and that village very much shapes how we see the world and how we see ourselves.
So, say for instance, in the case of, say, the child who, I mean, I think it's correct to not go over the top when a child gets injured, but can you also learn them to ignore pain to the detriment?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And there's good research showing that the small portion of our population who is born without the ability to feel pain, and there is a recognized medical condition for this, they tend to die at a younger age. They're more prone to things like infections from cuts that they didn't know they have, or more likely to take risky behavior. And we have to recognize that pain is an evolutionary advantage. It's something that enables us to look after our body and to look after ourselves and to preserve our life. And at the same time, so you might say, all right, pain's there to protect us, but then we've also got to recognize that most of the time, this is the amount of stress or the amount of load required to cause permanent physical damage. And this is the point at which we feel pain. There's always a buffer between the two. And it's our upbringing, it's our belief, it's our mindset, as well as our conditioning, such as how much running we've done, that determines the size of that buffer. So if a person hasn't done much running at all, there might be a huge buffer between the level of running required to do permanent physical damage and the level at which they feel really, really uncomfortable and in a bit of pain. Once the person runs a bit more, yes, their body's going to be more durable and more capable of running. And so that first barrier will go up, that first threshold will go up, but so will their level of tolerance to that discomfort. And so I don't really know if we should be looking to avoid pain completely, because I think it has a role to play. I've experimented myself with running, and I don't know how effectively these experiments can be done on ourselves, but I would run for a long distance and long enough that my toes and my feet would really start burning. And then I would tell myself that my elbows feel fine, and to focus on how good and comfortable my elbows feel, which I knew at the time was a ridiculous thought, because my elbows, of course, would feel fine. They weren't doing much work. And I did find that for that moment that I was focusing on my elbows, my feet did feel better. But then I focused on my feet, and then it would hurt more. So I'm not convinced that we should be ignoring pain, but rather recognizing the importance that it plays in preserving our health and preserving our function, and then using that wisely to enable performance. And I think that's what the best performers do. Is I don't think the best performers experience an absence of pain, but they are able to consider it and sometimes even use it to their advantage.
So that's like, say, an ultra runner, when they're deep into a, say, 100-miler and they're feeling the pain, they can look at it and accept it and then go, okay, so there is pain. Is it an injury? Yes or no? But then if it's not, you can just keep going. Is that kind of what you're talking about as well?
Exactly. It's being able to recognize it and almost view it with a level of curiosity. That curiosity immediately de-threatens the pain. And if there's one thing that I could explain simply without opening a whole can of worms, is that the amount of pain that we feel is an indication of how threatened our body feels at that time. So as an example of demonstrating that, there are 2 research studies I'd like to bring forward. The first is where they placed a piece of metal onto the research participant's skin. So they'd say, all right, Isabel, I'm going to place a piece of metal on your forearm. can you please tell me when that metal becomes painful? And they gradually heat the metal up until that person says, yes, it's painful now. And in this research study, they had two conditions. The first condition, they showed a person a red light while the metal was heating up. And in the second condition, where the metal was heating up, they showed them a blue light. And you can guess, Isabel, which condition brought the pain on first?
The red light, obviously.
The red one, yes. And in the second study that I'd like to bring forward, and this is one of many studies that's been conducted, they showed people a gauge with a needle that would go up and down, supposedly indicating the intensity of the electrical stimulus that was being put onto a person's body. And the gauge was actually a farce. It didn't indicate anything. It wasn't at all related to the amount of current going into the person's body. But anyway, they applied a constant current to these research participants who weirdly had volunteered for this. And it takes a special kind of person to volunteer for this. And then they would put the gauge up, and when participants saw that the gauge was going up, they would report more pain compared to when they didn't see the gauge going up. And so from this, we can see that pain is not just about what's physically happening to the body, the amount of electricity going into the body, the amount of heat on the skin, that it's also the information that our eyes take in. It's the information that we hear. It's the information that we smell and taste, and it's also very much related to our memories of the past and our hopes for the future. And so from this, pain is a response.
Well, hang on, you've just cut off for a second. Hang on. I've lost you. I can see you, but I can't hear you. Try again.
That's all right. Can you hear me now?
There we go. So sorry, go back to what you were saying.
Perfectly fine. Which part did you hear?
So you're saying it's a response. Yep.
Yeah, pain is a response. It's an output from our brain after our brain has taken on board all this information. The brain has listened to how hot the skin feels. It's looked at how red the light is. It's looked at the environment, such as, we're sitting in a room with researchers doing a pain study. It's then thinking, have we been in this situation before? What happened last time? What's going to happen next? And it assesses all that information, and within fractions of a second computes a meaning or gives a meaning to that experience, and then tells us if we're threatened. And if we're threatened, we're more likely to feel a pain. If we're not threatened and in fact we're safe, then we won't feel a pain, and we might feel something else, such as a gentle warmth on the surface of our skin. So from this, we can see that pain is not purely a physical thing, nor is it purely a psychological thing. It's not mind over matter necessarily, but mind and matter.
So if we've got an injury or a pain, does doing visualization of it healing or the pain going away, can that help?
I believe it does. And I would think focusing less on the pain going away, but more on the ability to move comfortably or the ability to rest comfortably. Again, if we focus on the pain going away, we might still be focusing on the pain.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's a good point. I think that visualization can help us. And a big part of that is, circling back to an earlier part of our conversation, having a goal, because often a goal is not just something written down on paper. Often a goal is a movie that we play in our heads, or at least a picture that we have in our minds. I think many of us think in pictures more than we think in words, and that picture might be Isabel crossing a line of 100-miler. It could be Isabel resting on the couch, satisfied that she completed an event that she had sacrificed a lot in the preparation of. It could be something to that nature, and that goal certainly does provide an analgesic effect to pain, as well as enable better performance. And there's various studies that we could discuss with demonstrate that. And one of my favorites is they got people on a treadmill and they asked them to run as far as they could for as long as they could. And then when the research participants said, I can't go any further, I'm done, they then showed them that the goal or the finish line was just a little bit further ahead. And they did
suddenly
run
they
further.
could do it. Yeah, that's interesting. So what about, say, like at the start of a race, often people are, talking at the start of a race and they're like, oh, I've got this injury and I'm this, they're kind of, so that they're giving an excuse in a way, but, well, not an excuse, but they don't want too much pressure. So they say, oh, I've got this injury and this niggle and that and that. How does that affect our performance if we're sort of telling people about different niggles and injuries, and how does that affect how we recover from injury and also how we perform?
Yeah, certainly. Look, again, it has to be an individual basis, because some people might need to tell themselves, say that they're doing an event where they need to pace themselves in order to get the best result. Telling themselves that they've got a hindrance might enable them to adopt the perfect pace at the start of the race, instead of going out guns blazing and then hitting
burning
a wall.
out. Yeah.
You're burning out, exactly. So in that way, a negative belief may advance their performance compared to the absence of that belief. At the same time, I believe you're right. I think sometimes we provide these excuses as a way of lowering the bar, so that we're not disappointed. And I think that's quite human, because we love being right and we love succeeding. And if we succeeded at a lower level, sometimes that feels just as good as setting the bar higher and striving for that. I think it has to be considered what level of ambition that individual wants. And as a coach or as a physiotherapist, it's very tempting to constantly push someone to a higher level. And for some cases, the athlete or the individual wants to be pushed to the absolute highest level. And so we can do so freely. And we could challenge all of their excuses and challenge all of their beliefs and say, well, hold on, why did you say that? Shouldn't you be saying this? Or hold on, this isn't going to help you. Maybe you should think about it differently. Or let's reframe that so that you can perform better. Sometimes people want to be pushed to their highest degree, and sometimes people don't. And I think something that I've learned as a physiotherapist, as much as being one of those annoying optimists in life in general, is that sometimes people want to experience negative emotions and excuses, and we've got to allow space for that. And to recognize also that some people perform beautifully from a state of negativity. And David Goggins would be a good example of that. I don't think anyone would describe him as an optimist. He seems to have this quite dark means of transforming excuses or beliefs that are often negative in nature into some performance advantage. And I'm not sure that any of us could simply adopt that approach because we've listened to a YouTube video of David Goggins speaking. I think that's a big part of his personality and his life until this point. So look, I think you're right. I think we've got to be aware of what effect our beliefs have. But I don't think there's something that we could, for an individual outside of ourselves or for ourselves, I don't think there's necessarily a switch that we can flick that suddenly changes our beliefs. I think we've got to cultivate them over time.
And so, and like you were saying about the 5 people that you spend the most time with, if we're with people who are often saying, oh, I've got this injury on my back and on my knee and on my whatever, does that affect how we see our own injuries, and do we thus feel more pain from ours? Yeah.
It depends on how agreeable the individual is. I think if a person is very agreeable and inclined to be empathetic and inclined to be influenced by those around them, then absolutely. And there are research studies that have demonstrated that when we watch someone move, we become better at moving in that way simply because we've observed them. And it's not, I think my voice is kind of a bit croaky.
It's early morning.
Yeah, maybe it's the early morning air. So as an example, if we watch someone jump as high as they can, these same pathways in our brain, the same nerves, same motor cortex is activated as when we actually do the jump. And so in this way, if we see someone hobbling around on their knee or talking about their disc bulge or talking about something that's troubling them, and they're moving in a particular way, that observation of their movement could influence how we move. And at the same time, if they talk about pain in a way that shapes our influence or our experience of pain, then that's going to change how we feel and how we operate as well. So I believe you're exactly right. And it's a good example would be when someone yawns in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the yawn tends to be infectious. I'm
Very
cautious
infectious.
to use that word during COVID. But you certainly start to, and it probably comes down to the significance of the event too. I mean, I think some of us might be wondering over the last few months, do I have a fever, or am I coughing? Does one cough count as coughing as a symptom? And we become much more vigilant. And so certainly I think we're very social beings as humans, and that does influence how we live our lives. And I don't think you can necessarily pick your parents so much, but you probably could be aware of and consider how those around you influence your own behaviour and your own performance in an athletic domain.
Yeah. Yep. No, that sounds good. Now, you said it's quite that you can't just change your self-beliefs. Is there anything we can do to be more positive about our injuries, which sounds crazy, but, I mean, runners do inevitably get injured. So is there a way of having a more positive outlook on the little niggles and the injuries to help us get through it?
Yeah, I think we can change our beliefs, and I have to believe that because I'm an innately hopeful person, and to believe the opposite would be devastating. I did have a client her father passed away, and her beliefs with respect to her own health and what she needed to do to be healthy changed overnight. And from that example, we can see that it is possible to have your beliefs changed in an instant. It's also a very significant event, the passing of a parent. There are other strategies that we could use, such as meditating on a particular question or journaling on a particular thought that I believe could be helpful in shaping our behavior and shaping our worldview. One that your listeners might be aware of is writing down 3 things that you're grateful for every day. That has been shown through some rigorous research to not only change people's mood long term, but it was demonstrated in the research that these people became more intelligent compared to those who didn't complete this task. And there's speculation as to why that is. Is it because they are less inclined to be distracted by doubts or hesitations and more inclined to just throw themselves into the task? That could be true. So I think that there are ways that we can meditate on or focus on thoughts or goals that do influence and in fact improve our performance, as well as, yes, certainly I think surrounding ourselves with certain people or seeking out the influence of particular individuals, whether that be a coach or a supporter. I think that can have a significant impact. And I think, of course, very much our behaviour, what we do on a day-to-day basis, has to be considered. And this is contentious because some people don't agree with this, but I do. Dr. Jordan Peterson has rose to acclaim recently as a clinical psychologist from Canada, and he talks about.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
You've read his work? Have you read his work about lobsters?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So for those listeners who have heard about Jordan Peterson's lobsters, you'll forgive me for explaining this for the benefit of those who haven't. So a lobster's neurochemical system runs on serotonin in the same way that a human's neurochemical system does. And it's not to say that humans and lobsters are identical; they are not. But it's a very similar network, and it's very difficult for anyone to argue that the networks are not related in any way and not comparable in any way. And so what we find is that when a lobster succeeds, when he fights another lobster and wins, he stands up taller, he opens up himself more broadly, exposing the vulnerable parts of his lobster self. And that's similar in ways to humans. When we stand, there are studies that have shown that when we stand tall and with an open shoulder or an open chest, that we, after doing so, feel more confident and are more inclined to face a problem with courage, and compared to slouching in the corner or curling ourselves into the fetal position. And so from this, we can see that if we achieve or accomplish certain things regularly in our life, and that could be something as simple as learning a new skill on a day-to-day basis. One of my favorites is learning how to do things with my left non-dominant hand just as good as my right dominant hand. And the more we accomplish things, the more we achieve things, the greater our belief becomes in our ability to achieve other things. And that's the basis of self-efficacy and self-belief from a behavioural perspective. But we have to consider that, as we talked about, the children falling over and grazing their knees, there is a huge education that we've been given
Learned
from
beliefs,
our parents,
I guess. Yep.
from our environment. Absolutely.
Yeah. So now, back onto Achilles tendinopathy that you were talking about. Just out of interest, you said isometric. I just thought we'll quickly segue onto this one as we're wrapping up. Now, normally we're told to do a heel drop and that sort of thing. And now you're saying isometric. I'm a big believer in isometric exercises. So can you tell me how that helps with healing that one?
Yeah, it's tempting to jump on a bandwagon. It's tempting to get swept away with trends. And when I say that, I'll tell you a short bit of history in the research of Achilles tendon pain. It was in Scandinavia initially, where the Alfredson protocol of heel drop, an eccentric exercise whereby a person would put their toes on the step and they would slowly lower the heel towards the next step and then come back up and then slowly lower the heel towards the next step. An eccentric calf and Achilles exercise. They had a heavy backpack on their shoulders. They did a lot of repetitions. I think it was 180 repetitions, and were encouraged to work through pain. This was for a group of middle-aged recreational runners who had a long-standing history of Achilles tendon pain. So it's that grumbly Achilles tendon that's always kind of been there and hasn't really gone away and doesn't really get much worse or better. It's just kind of always there. For that group, and they're in Scandinavia as well. So if we consider the effect that our upbringing and our environment has on our beliefs, all these factors are important. For that group, Achilles exercises, the heel drop, as you described, worked beautifully. It reduced their pain and improved their running. However, when you apply the same protocol to a young population of Australian athletes who have only had pain for a short period of time, they get worse.
Yeah.
So eccentrics isn't a panacea. We then thought, all right, if it's not eccentrics, what else could it be? A lot of research was done 5 years ago and in the years since on isometric exercise and the effect that isometrics has on pain. And at the time that I was doing my honours thesis, there were several theories about how isometrics would reduce pain in Achilles tendinopathy. One theory is that there was a cascade of neurochemicals that came from the...
Oh, hang on, we've lost you again.
Into the Achilles tendon. Another thought is that it would change blood pressure, and that change in blood pressure would influence pain. Another belief is that simply the expectation given by the researchers saying, Isabel, this isometric exercise is going to reduce your pain, that would actually exert an influence. And other people would quite underwhelmingly suggest that if it's eccentric or if it's isometric or if it's concentric or if it's a combination of all of the above, if you gradually load the body, it will adapt.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't have to be one particular style of contraction. And there are different types of Achilles tendon pain, of course. There are some Achilles tendon pains that are localized around the heel, and there are other Achilles tendon pains that feel sore more through the lower part of the leg, not as far as the heel, but through the medial part of the leg.
Yeah.
And we call these respectively insertional Achilles tendon pain and mid-substance Achilles tendon pain. And there is good anatomical reason and there is good clinical experience demonstrating that each of these responds to a different position of loading, and that the heel drop exercise that we described before can irritate one of them much more than the other. And so the contraction, whether it be concentric, eccentric or isometric, must be considered, as well as the position that the structures are placed in during the load. And we must also consider the dosage of that load as well. And I think also it has to be considered a person's pain tolerance, because some people, and I think now of a client who is ex-military, who would always talk about the number of kills that he had, and he had a belief that if it didn't hurt, it wasn't worthwhile.
Yep.
That there'd be no benefit in doing something that didn't hurt. And other people believe that pain is bad and pain must be avoided, and that pain indicates you're doing something dangerous. So yeah, I hope that ramble gives some insight.
No, that does. And so
again,
basically, it depends on the person and also on their pain threshold, I guess. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. All right, well, do you think was there anything we missed that you wanted to share with the listeners that I didn't touch on there at all?
I feel as though I've
everything
talked
there?
too much.
No.
I'd be interested to hear more your thoughts, Isabel. What are your thoughts on belief and ultramarathon? Much more about than I.
I very much agree with what you've said, and I certainly was brought up to not put too much focus on pain. And I mean, people have said to me that I must have a high pain threshold. I don't know, but because it's just what my pain threshold is. But I personally know that I don't feel pain as badly as other people. So, and I think that comes from my upbringing and my belief. And so I certainly do agree with that. Yeah. And I think sometimes it has led me. Sorry?
You were saying sometimes it has made you.
It has led me to run through pain that I shouldn't have, which has caused me to get injured. So, but that's okay.
It's all part of the you got to pick your poison sometimes, don't you? And you could either push through that barrier of what might be seen as rational and accept the consequences, or not. And something I would add in, you asked if there was something I wanted to add, is that we've talked a lot about upbringing and childhood and past. Future has an influence as well. And if anyone's interested in this, there are a few things that you could look into. You could look at Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning.
That's a great book.
It's an excellent book. So, Jewish German psychiatrist interned in a prisoner of war camp, not a prisoner of war camp, a containment camp, a concentration camp. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. During the Holocaust, and he wrote a book about how the meaning that people gave to their lives and the meaning that people gave to events around them influenced how well they could survive atrocious conditions. And the other book that I would encourage people consider is a book called The Courage to Be Disliked, wherein there's a conversation between a guru and a young man, and the conversation focuses on whether or not the teleological approach, teleology being the focus on future and the focus on pursuing goals, as compared to the ateological approach, which is what a lot of modern medicine is based on, to say that these things have happened in your past, this event has occurred, therefore this is your situation. The teleological approach says this is what you want in life, this is what you want to achieve, and this is where you're heading, therefore this is your situation. So you could say that let's say an Achilles tendon pain, it could be that a person has gone to see a physiotherapist for an Achilles tendon pain because they have had pain while running in the past, and that pain has impaired their performance. And the difference, that would be an ateological approach, past begets present. And a teleological approach would be that future begets present. The person has spoken to a physiotherapist about their Achilles tendon pain because they have an aspiration for running better in the future, for running freely, for performing at a higher function, and better understanding their body, which is more of a future focus. And so I think that would have to be considered. And we don't know to what degree past and future influence our current situation, but I think always both are at play.
Yeah, no, very interesting. I'll have to, I haven't read that book, so I'll be looking that one up too. All right, so how can people find you if they are interested in your physiotherapy and that sort of thing?
Sure. They're welcome to look up Exercise Thought Physiotherapy. We're online, but we also practice in Lilydale, the beautiful Yarra Valley, down here in Victoria. Sam Sook isn't the most common name, so they're welcome to search that. Sook like puke or Duke would help them to track me down. If they want to find me on Google or YouTube or Facebook, they can do so. Always happy to chat about these things. I really enjoy the questions that you asked, and thank you for the opportunity to present on this great podcast. And I hope the listeners enjoyed it. That they are most welcome to contact me. The easiest one is probably email, and then we can hit up a phone call if they want. Email is physio, physio @exercisethought.com.
All right. Well, I'll put all those links in the show notes if people haven't remembered to write them down while they're running. Anyway, thank you so much for chatting with us today, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Isabel. It's an absolute pleasure, and I hope your listeners got a lot out of it.
I'm sure they did. All right. Thanks for that. See ya.
Bye.